got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where we talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. And I'm excited to introduce today's guest in a second, Peter Shallard of Commit Action. We've known each other for many years, reconnecting. And before I introduce Peter, I want to just point, there's some amazing other episodes people should check out, Peter. And you were mentioning, really what Commit Action does is a lot of things, but if it's lonely at the top, and people need support at all levels, especially at the top. And I love talking about, I had Maurice Navone of Mobileye, and he talked about they were acquired by Intel for $15.3 billion. But I loved hearing the journey and what they had to sacrifice along the way. And at one point, he had to go back to his wife and kids and tell them, I'm pulling you out of all extracurricular activities because we can't afford them. There's no more eating out, because there's an up and down journey to this, right? I remember I had Tony Horton of P90X. People should check out that episode. He made money as a street mime, okay? Food and rent money. He put his hat on the street and did street miming to make food and rent money before he sold hundreds of millions of dollars of P90X. So there's all these stories. Check them out at InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. And Rise 25, I co-founded with John Corcoran. We help businesses connect to their Dream 100 relationships, partnerships, and we do that by helping you run your podcast. And Peter, for us, and we were talking about before you hit record, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at a way to give to my best relationships. So I want to have people I admire what they're doing, and they're giving to the world on my podcast to share what they're working on. So if you have questions, you've thought about starting a podcast, go to rise25.com, email us. We've been doing it since 2008 and helping others and doing it ourselves. So check it out. Peter Shallard is founder and CEO of Commit Action. He spent the last decade doing therapy and consulting with some of the world's highest achievers. He is known as the shrink for entrepreneurs. And for years, he was dissatisfied with pseudoscience and the lies in the entrepreneur personal growth world. And basically, he started Commit Action. And like I mentioned, it's lonely at the top. They actually help people execute, and they hold them accountable to doing so. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to catch up. It's been so long.
I'm like,
so
let's just catch up on the interview. You know what I mean? Like, that's what this is about. And that's what podcasting is about, catching up and making it go further with what people are working on. So tell people, I mentioned a little bit about Commit Action, but talk about the problem that you set out to solve.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, so Commit Action came about when I was I've spent the last, I think I've been saying it's a decade for a bit longer than a decade now. It's probably been like 12 years or 13 years being the shrink for entrepreneurs. So I've been working, one-on-one with some of the highest achieving entrepreneurs in the world, a lot of venture-backed kind of technology founders, that sort of stuff, really fun. And along the way, I connected with a lot of other entrepreneurs, a lot of other business owners. I was writing about my work online and kind of got this long tail of people who were interested in this idea of, what does it look like if you sort of psychologically optimize for business objectives. And I realized, many years ago that there was kind of something that a lot of people struggle with in common that was a bit different to the very white glove boutique kind of weird existential crisis dealing that I would do as the shrink for entrepreneurs. And that issue was largely what we found when I sort of dug into it and started researching was that a huge number of business owners are really dissatisfied with their performance, that they have an internal bar that they set where they know they should be. It's their sort of internal definition of what the best version of themselves is. And if they're an owner operator of a small business, it might they know what they're capable of sales wise. They know the level of networking they should be doing, or whatever the metric is, they've kind of got a sense, and they fall short of it often. And I sort of looked into this problem and realized that there was a really massive cultural kind of illusion, which I saw an opportunity to build a business to kind of solve, which was people believe they've got it wrong. They believe that they're broken. and it's what fuels, you said that that was a very nice intro. You said that I hate I sort of loathe the self-help industry, and it's right, because people believe that they're broken and they go seeking personal, professional development. They go to big rah-rah breakthrough weekends and look at like limiting beliefs and try to do all this inner work because they know that they're capable of more, but they just can't quite seem to, they wake up every day swearing that today, that today is going to be the day they turn over a new leaf, but then they just kind of repeat the same habits and patterns. And I wanted to kind of tell people the truth, which is like, this isn't actually your fault, that most people are not nearly as broken as they think they are. And Commit Action came about when we started doing research and figuring out what was really holding people back, and kind of concluded that the reason that a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs aren't the execution powerhouses that they wish they could be has nothing to do with, deep inner emotional blockages or anything like that. It's largely because they're operating in a vacuum of isolation, that it's very difficult to be the best version of yourself when nobody else is around, no one's watching, no one's supporting. And what we found that there's an almost perfect correlation with business owners who report that they're underperforming by their own standards, and people who say yes to the question, how many people on earth know if you crushed it yesterday or just totally phoned it in? And that's the vast majority of entrepreneurs. They're working in an environment, I don't know about you, but even people who have got very supportive spouses who are part of the journey, they kind of insulate those people from how they're actually doing. Hey, honey, how was your day? Oh, good, busy. But you don't really get into the fact that from 11 a.m. till 1 p.m., you just scrolled through Facebook and read a few BuzzFeed articles and do you know what I mean?
100%.
So that isolation, the fact that when you decide to start something and go off and be the captain of your own fate, the sort of master of your soul, you simultaneously, and it's never been easier to do that, it's never been a better opportunity to do that, but it's a double-edged sword, that decision, because it immediately takes you out of the environment that humans are hardwired to perform in, which is being a part of something larger than ourselves, having a group and being accountable. And we're social primates hardwired to thrive when we're working with others. And for so many entrepreneurs, as you said, it's lonely at the top. And that loneliness, that isolation, I think is the most misunderstood sort of social pathology of our time. And that was the thread I pulled on that got me started with Commit Action.
I want to hear, Peter, from the beginning, the initial what Commit Action looked like in the beginning, and then the evolution what it looks like now. But I love what you said. So what's holding people back when you're saying they're isolated and they don't have the proper amount of accountability or community? Is that what you would say is a big factor?
Yeah, I think that I think it's very invisible to most people that this is what's holding them back. Like, I think that there's a very common experience people have of sort of wondering why they're not more like Elon Musk. Like, why can't they step it up and run SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company and Neuralink and kind of do it all and be this renaissance man of this amazing entrepreneur who clearly has a morning ritual involving green juice and meditation that just makes him into like a superhuman, right? Like, what is the secret? I think we read books about these people. We read the Steve Jobs biography. We do all that stuff, and we disappoint ourselves by comparison. But what I think a lot of people fail to understand is the environment that they're operating in. They don't they sort of say to themselves in their basement, in their PJs, kind of bootstrapping and working away on their laptop to build their thing. They're like, why aren't I more like Elon? Yeah, the reason that you're more like Elon is that not more like him is that he's surrounded by a web of advisors and coaches and investors and direct report executives who earn multi-million-dollar salaries, who are all singularly focused on having him show up and be in the zone, be able to do his thing, work in his zone of genius. And that level of social accountability and support unlocks, incredible performance in almost anyone. By choosing to start stuff, by being an entrepreneur, we throw all of that away and basically try to go and build in a total vacuum. And yeah, like I'm forgetting what your original question was, but
what's holding people back? And I just wanted to point out, you mentioned isolation, accountability, and community. And if there's anything else, yeah.
The lifeline, and that's what we focus on, is providing that lifeline of accountability to entrepreneurs who would otherwise be isolated. Because, I mean, there's certainly loads of different things that hold people back, but you're going to work through any challenge you face faster if you've got that lifeline of accountability in your life. Because we, as humans, we tend to outsource our mental well-being and our optimization to the tribe. So
I want to say, anyone who's listening to this podcast and you're not watching it, Peter is in a backyard, so you may hear the sounds of nature in the background. He's not in his typical New York place, so just so you know. And if you're wondering if there's whistling in the wind, so I'm sort of jealous that you're in 70-degree weather in winter.
It's not too obnoxious, as the sun just came out a little bit and the cicadas here started
that's what I hear. I did not know what that was. Like the cicadas. Okay. So what's something comparable, Peter? Okay. Comparable would be, when I picture accountability for health. Okay. And I guess, do people use this for business and health, or are people using commit action in your team and your coaches for business related things? Because I guess the equivalent, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say we're holistic, but our goal is business optimization, business results. But we believe that we're also playing the long game with our clients. Like so what we do is basically accountability performance coaching. We help people get more focused, double their productivity, by having really clear weekly plans that they commit to with an accountability coach. Kind of like having a concierge for your to-do list or a personal trainer for productivity. Now, we're playing the long game, which means if our clients burn out after 2 months of the most fast and furious productivity of their lives, we're failed. So health, wellness, balance, all of that is actually part of holistic optimization. And it's one of our big pillars that we actually really focus on, in addition to ideas like specificity, getting the right level of implementation granularity for all of the things you're working on, which is a problem people struggle with when they're kind of making plans with their whiteboard just by themselves. We also have this idea of, we just call it the pillar of play. We ask our clients, what are you doing to not delay gratification? Because entrepreneurs in general, and entrepreneurship is a game of delayed gratification, right? I think all of us, everyone who's listening to this will resonate with that idea of at some point in life, might have been when you were really young, might have been later in life, you kind of come to this place where you're like, if I work really hard and take a shot at this thing now, while my friends are off screwing around having fun, I'm going to build this thing, and then 5 years from now, I'm going to have the jet ski and the bathtub of champagne and whatever else, and then I'll show them, right?
You're speaking to me, Peter. Keep going.
Yeah, that bathtub of champagne sounds good right about now.
No, but I mean, you're speaking to me in the sense of, we definitely are listen, right now it's tough. I'm willing to work long hours, but I know, in X number of years, I'll be able to relax more than maybe my peers, or who cares about peers? I'll be relaxed more and I'll have kind of more of the life that I want. So what have you heard? What do people do in the not delay gratification? What have you seen people do to actually implement? Because that's important.
It's so crucial. And we try to find the optimal balance. And again, this is not to beat the dead horse, but this is the power of accountability. When you're on your own in isolation, pushing yourself, if you're an entrepreneur, no one's got bigger expectations for you than you, right? So you're pushing yourself, and you kind of know balance is a thing, and you're trying to find that okay, well, I'll take this time off and I'll relax. You're trying to find that sweet spot all on your own. When you have somebody who's outside the fishbowl, who's a pro, a trained professional, who's helping you find that balance, they can pinpoint it much, much quicker. Yeah. And it's different for everyone. What we really focus on, one of the questions we ask, is almost it's not a sort of a clinical term at all. It's definitely a metaphor, but there is this really useful idea from old school psychology, like Freudian, Jungian psychoanalysis, which is the idea of the inner child. What are you doing? The question I love to ask, and our coaches ask sometimes, is when was the last time you did something that your 7-year-old self would have just been over the moon to do? And a lot of entrepreneurs build because they want freedom and they're looking to achieve a certain level of lifestyle. But we are good at delayed gratification, and most entrepreneurs, certainly most successful entrepreneurs, are actually better at kicking the can down the road and kind of having that later. And so the thing that we challenge our clients to do when we sense that they need balance at Commit Action is we kind of have them go and make a list of like, what did you love to do when you were 7? And the better question is, what did you wish you could do when you were 7? Then you get to the really good stuff, because what a lot of people realize is like some of this stuff is well within reach. I remember years ago, I had a client who had this problem, who was had a multi-million-dollar business that spat out 7 figures of profit. They were really busy, but one of their dreams was they wanted to learn to fly and to ultimately like fly private. They wanted to buy a little jet that they could get licensed to fly around and live that kind of lifestyle. And severe delayed gratification, because it takes a long time to do that. One of the breakthroughs that I helped them understand was you can go down and start to work on getting your pilot license. Like I think the introductory class is like $150. And so rather than being a big stress ball and like almost losing steam and having a crisis of like motivation because they were so tired after working for 10 years, I was like, hey, look, next Saturday, go take your first pilot lesson. You got to do that anyway. They don't let you just hop into the Learjets. You got to start in a little Cessna. And they went and did it and had a blast and started working on it and kind of found some balance instead of working on the 10-year plan and then I'll get to have fun. They actually brought the fun up, the minimum viable dosage of fun to the present that refueled them and got them the motivational juice to keep going.
Peter, I love that. Give me another example. I love that because you kind of almost said, okay, here's your big goal, but like what's a small chunk you could actually do that gets you closer to that, but also even fulfill some of it in a sense and is maybe just as exciting to do than just think about and wait on. So I love that. Yeah, I want to fly a plane one day, own my own jet. Well, let's take a class tomorrow. What's another good one that you've seen people take their minimum viable dose of not delayed gratification?
I mean, it's less sexy as an example, but one of the things is just having people understand that they've got to carve out time to do the things that they ostensibly like to do. Like there's a principle of reducing friction that I think really helps. So I'll give you an example of this. We had a client a while ago who kind of understood this idea and was really we asked the question, what did your 7-year-old self wish he could do? 7-year-old self was obsessed with motorcycles, had posters of motorcycle like races and stuff all over his bedroom walls. And he was quite a successful entrepreneur and owned a bunch of bikes. Like he had a collection, lived in New York City and had this garage like everyone does in New York, like a little ways away. But he had like 6 or 8 like Ducatis and like all this stuff. Never drove them though, right? Classic like overworking entrepreneur. And so the conversation we had was about reducing the friction to be able to have those fun experiences. And what we came up with was actually he needed to always have a bike out of storage, parked outside of where he worked and lived, so that it was just there. And one of the challenges we set was when you catch yourself procrastinating, doing whatever it was his thing, when he kind of like got out of the zone, lost the flow state and started fluffing around. Instead of doing that, just walk downstairs and get on the bike and blast up the West Side Highway for 10 minutes and make that inner 7-year-old smile. And then when you're sick of that, come back like 20 minutes later, whatever, come back and see if you feel like working. And instead of it being this thing where like on a Sunday, if he had time, he would plan and do a major thing and go out on a bike with a friend for 5 hours, we made it this like everyday mental refresh. And what we're trying to do, like the psychological principle here is, if your unconscious mind associates work with suffering, you're not going to want to do it. And what we had to do was inject those pleasurable moments so that for him, working was like a nice overlap and a mix of like struggle in the service of a long-term vision and also like fun and joy and pleasure. And then his unconscious mind started to go, yeah, I can do more of this. And it pulled him out of that burnout as well.
What was it for you, Peter? What was your 7-year-old self excited to do?
I'm a shameless video gamer. When I was a kid, I was a dork. I loved playing video games, and I still do. Like for me, what I love about it is that it's so immediately accessible. It's very like low friction, right? But yeah, I spent, for those of you who are keeping score at home and know about this, I spent like the last part of the year in 2020 here just desperately trying to get a PlayStation 5. I managed to figure it out. They were in really short supply, but that's what I like. I play for minutes a week. It's not necessarily a long amount of time, but I love escapism. Like I love to read like a fantasy and science fiction. I love to play games that like take me off to a different place.
What's your favorite game then?
There's so many. I finished becoming a dad, which happened to me a couple of years ago, really curtailed my gaming time. So
exactly.
The game Red Dead Redemption 2 came out just before my son was born, and I finished it. It took me 2 years, 2 years to finish, but I finally finished it. That was amazing.
I could totally relate to that. Like I've been doing hours of research on the Oculus Quest 2. I think according to this call, I should just go get it and do it because it looks amazing. But
particularly if you can connect up what your professional efforts with like those rewarding moments where you give yourself something like that, it really builds that psychological connection, which is like at the core for everyone. You want to have this mental equation, which is like, the more I work and the more I delay gratification, the more fun my life becomes. And that cycle has to be there. Otherwise, if it's not, there lies burnout.
Peter, is there another, I love the question about what would my 7-year-old self be excited about? What's another amazing question that you tend to ask yourself or other people?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. There's so many.
I don't know if there's something in like the commit action, sequence, like you want to make sure, okay, you're the coaches, listen, you need to make sure you ask people this question, or maybe it's a point that people get stuck at in their journey.
A big thing that we do a lot of at Commit Action, so we're, just for your listeners' clarity, we're meeting with our clients, like our coaches meet with their clients every week, and they make a game plan for the next 7 days. It's like they'll build out a to-do list of the highest leverage, highest priority things, and then they'll actually create like a calendar, which is when are you going to work on those things? Let's set out the idea being we set appointments for meetings with other people we're always accountable to, we always show up for, but we don't set appointments with ourselves to do the deep game-changing work. We let that slip in between the cracks of our low-leverage coffee dates, and it's like an absurd way of doing things. So we do the opposite. We build out this calendar of meetings. One of the things we ask a lot of people, we make these weekly plans, what they're going to do, what's the highest leverage thing, and when they're going to work on it. And then a thing that we like to poke at quite a lot is what's the ultimate purpose behind what it is that you're working on. Because I think that like a big part of accountability coaching, personal training for productivity basically, is making sure that week to week people stay connected with the highest leverage kind of things that they can be working on. And it's amazing how often entrepreneurs engage in like a sort of a low level form of self-deception about what the best use of their time is. Yeah. Like I think we can kind of we can think about, okay, this is my big plan for the year. This is what I want to accomplish. I'm trying to double revenue, 2x the number of clients we have, or whatever the business goal might be. But it's amazing how week to week, like at the granular level, micro implementation wise, our clients will start really telling the coach, like this week, I've just got to get to the bottom of my inbox. Like I need to do that before I can do anything else. And the question we ask is, for what purpose? For what purpose? Okay, you're telling me this is a priority. For what purpose is it a priority? What's the ultimate intention behind it? And that is kind of some of the secret sauce of high level accountability, is to connect the dots between the little things we think we should do and what our self-confessed ultimate aims are, what our ultimate objective is. And what our clients find, what every entrepreneur finds, is that like, I don't want to say half the time, but a good chunk of the time, we think we have to do stuff. We think that we're working on these urgent and important things. that are actually not really aligned with our ultimate kind of intention.
What are some other excuses, Peter, that get in the way? Like, you've probably heard them all. So I need to get the bottom of my inbox, right? What are the other some excuses that we tell ourselves that we should be aware of? Because in our minds, that's totally legitimate. Well, I have all this stuff. But what you're saying is, well, what's the purpose, right? What other excuses do people make? Common ones do you hear?
I think that there's a whole mess of stuff around delegation, right? Like a huge one. There's so many small business owners who, and frankly, big business owners too, who really don't really have control issues. Like they struggle to be able to let go of certain things. And so they spend a huge amount of time, like half the plateaus that people hit in terms of business growth are caused by the fact that the founder of the business actually is too busy for the business to grow any further because they've failed at delegating, at training, at recruiting, at the piece of building an organization bigger than ourselves. And that's, it's our job to remind entrepreneurs of the definition of entrepreneurship. And I believe that true entrepreneurship is the act of building something bigger than ourselves that runs without us. And a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up being owner operators, being freelancers inside of their own businesses, right? Like it's and there's all sorts of psychological reasons. For some people, it's that they love the artistry of what they do, right? Like
they love the craft.
Who has trouble letting go because they know that no one's going to do it quite like they would. But that's the challenge, right? That's the game. Like entrepreneurship is about figuring out how you build an organization that does better architecture than you could do on your own. So that's a big one.
Peter,
I see your head nodding away.
It's amazing because obviously you've worked intimately with like thousands, probably tens of thousands at this point. So you hit all these pain points. I mean, those are, the delayed gratification, the, having control issues with delegating, failing to hire or recruit properly, all these things, totally hit home for me. I don't know, anyone listening, it hits home. It was funny because I was talking to another CEO and really successful guy. I mean, he's started multiple companies and successful companies. And he said, Jeremy, how do you maintain balance? Like you just had a child in the past year. And I'm like, I have no idea. Like talk to, but it sounds like, I mean, any entrepreneur, founder, CEO who's thinking about these things should just check out Commit Action, and it helps. But so walk through, because you have found this product market fit over the last decade. What does that look like now? Like who's perfect to work with Commit Action right now? And then what do you do for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've been at it I've been at the Shrink for Entrepreneurs for a decade. Yeah. Commit Action's a little bit younger, but we when you and I first connected, I was just kind of experimenting with it. And the original experiment was like, I realized that accountability or lack of accountability was the problem, and started thinking to myself, okay, let's look at what happens if you take like coaching and therapy and you get rid of all the coaching and therapy, but you just keep the relationship. Like just that, because I have this crazy theory that even bad life coaching, like really bad life coaching, is actually somewhat effective. Because even if you have like the world's dumbest life coach who just has no idea what they're talking about, just having somebody check in and ask you how you're doing, asking you, hey, how was your week last week? You said you were going to do this. How did it go? That actually is proven. There's a lot of research that shows us that type of inquiry, when it's coming from another human, modifies our behavior. We do a little bit better when we've got that. So the basis of Commit Action was like minimum viable dose of coaching. And that's what we started with. Like the original iteration that I was on Mixergy back in the day talking with Andrew about was we pair entrepreneurs up with somebody who meets with them once a week over the phone to talk about their goals for the next 7 days. And that's it. We do it again. We check in with them a week later. Really simple, really straightforward. So over time, we've kind of stayed true to the spirit of that minimum viable dose, but we've built it out. We built a proprietary software product that really kind of got us moving, because we kind of realized the ultimate version of this would be if I came and sat with you in your office with your whiteboard and your kind of wall plan or your calendar or whatever, and sort of like looked at what's on the whiteboard and maybe scrubbed some stuff out and rewrote it in more specific language, like probed you about it and got those goals dialed in and more concise and clear, and then sort of circled the top 3 and said, that's your focus for the next 7 days. I'll see you in a week. So we built a software platform that enables that collaborative conversation to happen. It's a two-way, like this beautiful web app that works, like the clients can jump on their phone and actually see while they're on their weekly call with their accountability coach, the things that they've put in getting optimized. The coach will be quizzing them and say, okay, I'm gonna flesh this goal out, say exactly what you need to do, where you're gonna start. And you can see that unfold, see things being reordered, reprioritized, see the calendar being built out of when you're going to be working on all of this. Take a look at it, sync it with your work, your 17 work calendars, make sure that there is actually time. It's another big part of what we do is, like, every week we make this plan, and then we give the clients the ultimate accountability of, like, look at your other calendars, your appointments. Now look at this plan for the deep work that you and I've just made. Are they compatible? Is there space? Because one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs will do is book themselves for 35 hours of meetings in a week, and then have this mental expectation that they should be doing about 20 hours of deep work on top of that. And they're also a new father or whatever it might be. And then they finish, it's obviously not going to happen. And they finish the week beating themselves up because they didn't get more work done, but they actually set up, the rules of the game were such that they were always going to lose. So we catch that before it happens, get them with a realistic plan, or even say, hey, if you want to do this, you got to cancel some of these meetings. You got to make time to work on your business. And so that's how long are those, evolved.
Peter? So granular, so how long is there a set amount, or just varies from week to week? Does the coach meet with that the person meets with the client? So
we do very quick little check-in calls. They're usually no more than 20 minutes. They're designed, like, our target market is busy people who don't want to spend an hour and a half with an introspective life coach on a weekly basis, but need that hit of accountability and need a concrete plan. So they're nice and short. And then we'll check in the coach checks in throughout the week by text message, via email. So, when you're meeting with your coach on Monday and we kind of identify Thursday afternoon, that's the time you're going to work on, you're going to write that new website copy. You need 3 hours of dedicated copywriting time. You'll get a text at, 3:10 saying, Jeremy, it's 3:00. Are you at your desk? Are you writing? And
I'm watching YouTube videos, Peter. No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I should.
It's being seen. It's the knowledge that, really what we do is we give the entrepreneurs the ability to have someone on their team whose sole job is managing their focus. And it's like crazy to me that should be the first hire anyone makes. We let you do it fractionally for $299 a month, but you've got to have someone on your team who keeps you on track.
Yeah. It's super affordable, and I don't know if someone signs up, hopefully they get grandfathered in, but I didn't even want to mention the price because I'm like, he's going to probably raise it at some point because it's so inexpensive for someone right now. For $299, they have like a personal person holding you accountable every single week and month is a tremendous value, I love, because people do it for their health all the time, right? And why not do it for your business?
And it works. Anybody who's worked with a personal trainer, for like at the gym, will tell you, like people might not like the sort of workout style or whatever, but nobody argues with overall it works. When somebody is there going, drop and give me 20, you show up and you drop and give them 20. Like, you do it because and the reason is there's 100 million years of evolutionary hardwiring. We're social primates. We care very much that the other monkeys think highly of us because we want them to, look after us and leave enough fruit on the tree for us and our children. We're hardwired to play that game of like, I got to make sure that I'm being a good person to this other person. I got to make sure that I'm fulfilling my obligations and my promises. And the difference between, to take it full circle, between like the isolated small business owner and Elon Musk is the amount of relationships that, he's got that obligation to show up and perform. And so that's what we offer, is the that coach who becomes that for everything that you're working on.
Peter, I have one last question. First of all, thank you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. I mean, I've learned, from you, distance-wise, just listening to you talk about how do you achieve more, what's holding you back. And so thanks for sharing this, and also creating Commit Action where other people can do the same thing in a really systemized fashion. So I want to point people to commitaction.com. Check it out. Check out other episodes of the podcast, Inspired Insider and Rise 25. Are there any other places I should point people to online to check out more?
If you want to, I've got 2 homes on the internet. Commit Action is the main one, commitaction.com, but also my Shrink for Entrepreneurs website and blog that's been around for, it's now like an ancient history item in the archives of the internet, petershallard.com. Been writing about the intersection of business and psychology there for 13 years or whatever it's been. So, you can find me there and on Twitter at Peter Shallard. And get in touch. I love hearing from people. So I'm pretty easy to find. Drop me an email. Tell me about what you're working on. Let's talk.
Check it out, commitaction.com. Peter, last question. We talked about, before we hit record, about Carl Mattiello, and talk a little bit about his story.
Carl's a great friend of mine who I knew before I even started Commit Action, I think. And I gave a talk at a conference he was at where he was trying to figure out how to quit his job at Tesla. He was an engineer there and built a software company. And he was one of the first people who joined Commit Action way back in the day. He worked with us consecutively for like 5 years or something, and went from being a guy working on building his first bootstrap SaaS company to like solo, where he really needed the accountability, to actually quitting and for what I consider to be the only valid reason someone can leave Commit Action, which is that he had so much accountability from the team that he built and the partners that he was working with, that he no longer really needed what we were doing. And I was like, that's great, man. Like, enjoy. And I think he left when he was a headcount of over 20. He founded a company called Clinic Metrics that helps
physical therapists. Yeah.
Physical therapists. Yeah. It's a software business that helps them scale their businesses and manage their businesses. And then he also spun out Breakthrough, which is a sort of a marketing and sort of events business within that industry as well. And has just been riding a rocket ship ever since. So he left us with double digits of employees and millions of dollars in revenue, and has just since then taken it to the moon. And a great friend that I'll have forever, I hope. And we're like just a cool testament to the power of accountability and how it can become self-sustaining.
What did he say, Peter, what was great feedback from him that was working? What would he say, this is what really worked for me with Commit Action?
I think for him, the focus on the incremental, that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're getting going, have got I got to 10x, I got to go big, I got to figure it out. And what we do at Commit Action is we're really about like, blow yourself away with what you incrementally accomplish in a couple months, in a year, right? Like, our best customers are the ones who work with us and set these goals and chip away at these huge plans. And then they turn around 12 months later and are like, holy shit, look at what I built. We don't believe in overnight success. We don't believe in, if somebody's telling you they're going to 10x your business in 30 days, they're lying, right? Like, it doesn't work that way. But incremental execution, when it's relentless and you've got to have the balance, you've got to have the sustainability, you've got to do all these things we've talked about, it will blow you away what you're capable of accomplishing long term. And I think for Carl, that was what we really helped him do, was that systematic chipping away at this big vision that he was executing on.
Everyone, check out commitaction.com. Peter, I want to be the first one to thank you. And everyone, we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I feel like $100 grand.